Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight is the Analects, and we'll be covering book 2, verses 17, 18, and 19. Type exclamation point to read your version of the Analects, and then we'll go to Jason and Amon's translation. Penny, thank you.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yeah, just fine. Thank you.
All right. And 17.
Yes, 17, 18, and 19.
Okay. Chapter 17. The master said, shall I teach you what knowledge is? When you know a thing, to hold that you know it. And when you do not know a thing, to allow that you do not know it. This is knowledge. Cao Chang was learning with a view to official emolument. The master said, hear much and put aside the points of which you stand in doubt, while you speak cautiously at the same time of the others. Then you will afford few occasions for blame. See much and put aside the things which seem perilous, while you are cautious at the same time in carrying the others into practice. Then you will have few occasions for repentance. When one gives few occasions for blame in his words and few occasions for repentance in his conduct, he is on the way to get emolument. The Duke I asked, saying, what should be done in order to secure the submission of the people? Confucius replied, advance the upright and set aside the crooked, then the people will submit. Advance the crooked and set aside the upright, then the people will not submit.
Thank you, Penny. Would anybody else like to read their version of the Analects? Will, go right ahead.
All right, thanks. 17, 18, 19. All right. The master said, you, that's the name. Shall I teach you what it means to know? When you know, say you know. When you do not know, say you do not know. This is knowledge. Zhang was learning about gaining an official salary. The master said, listen to much, leave out what is doubtful, be careful when speaking about the rest, and you will make few errors. Look at much, leave out what is dangerous, be careful when acting on the rest, and you will have few regrets. If you make few errors in speech and have few regrets in action, an official salary lies in them. And 219. Duke I asked, what should be done to make the people cheerfully obedient? Confucius replied, raise up the honest and place them over the crooked, and the people shall become cheerfully obedient. Raise up the crooked and place them over the honest, and the people shall become disobedient.
Thank you, Will. Amon, would you like to go ahead and?
I think Suki got her hand up.
Oh, forgive me. Suki.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, 17. The master said, Yo Zilu, do you know what I have been trying to teach you? To say that you know something when you know it, and to say that you do not know something when you do not know it. This is true knowledge. 218. Zhang was studying with the hope of obtaining an official position. The master said, use your ears well and widely, and leave out what is suspect. Speak with caution about the rest, and you will make few mistakes. Use your eyes well and widely, and stay away from potential perils. Act with caution, even after the perils are kept at bay, and you will have few regrets. To make few mistakes in your speech, and to have few regrets in your action. These are the keys to securing a career as a salaried official. 219. Duke Ali asked, "What shall I do to make the common people come under my sway?" Confucius replied, "Promote the upright and place them above the crooked, and the people will be in awe of you and come under your sway. The opposite will happen if you promote the crooked and place them above the upright." Yeah, that's my version. Thank you.
Thank you, Suki. Okay, if nobody else would like to read, we will go ahead and move on to Amon and Jason's translation.
All right, let me share my screen here. See if that worked. Can you all see my screen all right?
Yes.
Excellent. So, Analects 2:17, the master said, "You, can I teach you knowledge? You know what you know. You don't know what you don't know. This is knowledge." Analects 2:18, Zhezhong was learning how to pursue a position in the civil service. The master said, "If you can listen widely and put aside what seems doubtful and speak carefully about the rest of what you heard, i.e., what is not doubtful, then you won't be blamed. If you can watch widely and put aside what seems perilous, i.e., perplexing, and act carefully according to the rest of what you watched, i.e., what is not perplexing, then you won't be regretful. Few blames in speech and few regrets in action. You are in the way of getting a good job." I think that should actually be on the way to getting a good job. 19. Duke I asked, "What should be done in order to make the people obey you?" Confucius replied, "Raise up the upright and set them above the crooked, and the people will obey. Raise up the crooked and set them above the upright, and the people will not obey." As you can probably tell, there are still little grammatical edits that have escaped us. But in these three chapters, or three sections, you have a question and answer format happening between the master and a student, or the master and a duke, or another student who's ambitious. It's interesting that this question and answer format comes this far into the end, but I think that's intentionally done because we've had so many specific little lessons being offered up until this point. 16, a good example, criticizing different teachings is harmful. Now you get an example of people who've heard these lessons and how are they taking them on board? How are they going about trying to implement them? And Confucius sort of critiquing the applications of knowledge or refining his students' applications of knowledge. It's interesting because we think of dialogue as sort of a protracted style of narrative and writing, but in good form. almost all of these are as terse as anything else in the Analects. And it kind of gets to the point that the lesson is the lesson. Here's, just a little bit more. Go work on it. Like you were saying, Joe, the Analects makes you work. It's not just sit down and read. It says sit down, take a pen and paper. There will be quizzes later on. And here's a lot of those pop quizzes showing up in chapter 2.
I agree. I mean, specifically, in chapters 7 and 17 and 18, I did need to sit down and actually think about what they were trying to convey, and in many cases, I ended up writing about things that I wouldn't necessarily thought about, but I'll hold off on sharing those for now. I would like to hear from everyone else first as to what they've taken away from chapters 17, 18, and 19. James.
Okay, hi everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
17 is, for me, it's just the only transliteration I'm making is that it's a virtue of knowledge. I call it knowledgeable. The person who is knowledgeable is that because he is owning what he knows or she knows, and owning what you don't know. So that's kind of my take on 17. Number 18, I title it How to Get Paid. Listen carefully, set aside the points with which you stand in doubt. Speak cautiously and not above others to avoid blame. Having great vision, put aside the perilous, cautiously implementing all the rest, and that avoids regret or repentance. So as long as you avoid the perilous, your vision shows you what is perilous, implement the rest. And then number 19, in order to secure submission of the public, including employees and all the rest, even if like you're just a manager, your employees, advance the upright and set aside the crooked. Pretty logical, but I love the contribution that Confucius makes in terms of talking about the practical, just what it is that you help you succeed in business or government, and what you need to do. He calls it here, and I think in the Confucius word, I think is submission, but it's the submission of the people comes with the reputation of the leader in advancing the just and upright, and setting aside the crooked. So I love that sentiment. Thank you.
The importance of being virtuous as a leader, is the way to set the people upright. That's very clear in this passage. I'm going to just ask Aman a really quick question. The Duke
yes.
I saw it. I saw a little bit written. I didn't catch it on Jason's translation. Who?
Hang on a second, and I can share it again.
Yeah.
So that I can share the notes.
Yeah, because I didn't have a chance to look him up.
Well, it's honestly hard for me to say.
Okay.
But Duke Ai is the Lord of Lu. The state of Lu would be one of what was starting to erupt into almost 200 splinter states at this point in Confucius's life. It's ironic. You'll hear talk about the warring states, but truly when you get to the warring states, you have fewer separate entities existing than in the springs and autumns period, which is the time Confucius was writing in. And it says he was 43 years younger than Confucius, and his posthumous name was I, which actually means morning. So which specific duke this may have actually been is questionable. But the veracity or the historicity of a lot of what happened in that time, there are very few sources for. So it's really hard to confirm that Lu was not a state that stands out in my immediate memory, though there probably was a state of Lu. This would be an example of why Confucius couldn't land a job. Going to another state to act as consultant was kind of what the literati class were attempting to do in the springs and autumns period. And you see here the boss interviewing him with, what should I do to make people obey me? And Confucius basically says, you know, be upright, keep upright people, stop giving in to the crooked. Nobody wants to hear that at a job interview. And this would be another example of him losing out on a civil service position. That happened many times in the course of his life, and why Confucius kind of resigned himself to having been a failure at what he saw as his purpose, which was to get one of these civil positions so that he could implement his teachings and really set a place straight. The, of course, grand irony is, though he felt like a failure in his lifetime, nobody has influenced more human beings in history than Confucius, just by sheer population numbers of China, and generations and generations, 2,300, 2,500 years of Chinese populace are deeply shaped by his teachings. And that's just China. You add Korea, Japan, and all the tributary states of the ancient world, and it's really hard to say anyone influenced more thinkers in all of human history.
So there was one thing that I did find now that I see that Jason was referring to the state of Lu. And this is in one of my earlier notes, that it is the Duke of Ai was presented with a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to sagely worthiness fill his state. If he had simply raised, well, I'll just go to the bottom line. Unfortunately, he cared only about sensual pleasures and left control of the administration to a flock of evildoers. As a result, the hearts of the people were filled with resentment. Duke Ai was troubled with the state of affairs, and so asked this question to Confucius. Said he could have been the king of Lu if he had governed instead of the lord of Lu, if he had governed virtuously.
That sentiment of Confucianism is consistent throughout its development, throughout the history of China. 100 years later, you'll have Mencius, who has a famous story of someone saying, how can you profit my kingdom? And him just immediately saying, profit? You want to talk to me about profit and loss and value? You do not understand what's really important. And again, this was somebody interviewing for a job, but they took this, Confucians took these lessons very seriously. And this passage is probably a good example of how serious these teachings were. It wasn't just pontification and ideology. These were life and death stakes, and the existence or utter decimation of states in this period of tumult. And so being kind of terse and even a little bit rude may seem somewhat antithetical to our modern notions of Confucianism, but Confucianism wasn't Confucianism in his time, nor was it even in Mencius' time. It took a couple hundred years for it to get up and running and become the ideology of a state. At that point, you're still dealing with people who just knew they were right. And no amount of evidence to the contrary was going to sway them.
Thank you, Aman. So next up, great comments, is Will, followed by Brian.
Yeah, thanks.
Followed by Kevin, then Brian, I'm sorry.
Yeah, what was it, Aman? You just said that Confucius was, yeah, he ended up becoming the irony. Yeah, he becomes he thinks he's a failure, but he becomes like the most influential philosopher of all time. But I think, and I could be wrong, that even though he thinks he's a failure, you don't get the sense that he's a person who wallows in self-pity. Like it's more of a just sort of a matter-of-fact kind of thing. That's I could be wrong there, but on 217, I found a little note saying that the person he's talking to is a more angry disciple, and when you're angry, you kind of are prone to saying things without maybe checking your facts or being exaggerating and stuff. So that could be why he, could have been tailored to that specific student, which I have called Zilu.
Both are his correct names, yes.
Yeah.
Everyone has like 3 or 4 names, depending on the context. On 218, let's see. Yeah, this one just reminded me just how important this is today, like especially if it's like any political job or anything where you're going to be the, just, you don't want to be a liability, like this like this is something people would tell you today, just like make sure what you say is not going to get you in trouble. I just this just seems like. Also, the other thing is there are certain things that like border on, is this like slightly religious? And like you would never see in like the Bible like someone talking about how to get an official government salary. Like, so this is that just in fact, I don't think you would see that in most Greek philosophy either. It's just maybe it distinguishes Confucius as a certain distinction. But let's see. And yeah, 219. I just, I'm struck again by talking about like obedience, and I think earlier, maybe in book 1, there's some talk about rebellion or defiance, and like as an American, these kind of don't sound like if you heard this in a political context, you would think like, is this like North Korea or something? Like we think of like defiance as a great thing. Like that's how our system works, is you speak truth to power and then they correct themselves. But this is like, I mean, he's not saying you make people obedient by like harsh punishment. He's saying you make them obedient by promoting basically the worthy, trustworthy people. So that's definitely not authoritarian. Yeah, and you know, I don't know if there was any democracy in the world at the time of Confucius. So I think like the way I view this through the lens of American democracy is you know, I have to think that he lives in a different context, and social stability, and you know, was very important for people's well-being, and so you didn't want rebellions, and I guess anyway, thanks.
Yeah, you made some excellent points, Will, as always. I really appreciate it. Yeah, please go ahead.
If I could respond real quick, there were
Please.
a lot of things that you said, Will, that struck chords with me, but I kind of wanted to try and wrap a lasso around them all. And I'll start from the end and work backwards. The time frame of ancient China in this period was moving from aristocracy to meritocracy of sorts. And what I mean by that is you had noble-born individuals who were still seen as having rights to rule because of their birthright. But there was a budding meritocracy of advisors, ministers, people who were kind of the nuts and bolts and gears of the administration of state. And Confucius seems to split the difference with an appreciation and respect for nobility. Even himself being a low-level noble, he kind of has an appreciation for his own position, but then seems to feel that it is still only that the aristocracy may rule with the goodwill of those they govern. So that you may be by birthright the duke or the king or, you know, the marquis, whatever position you hold. But if you have squandered the goodwill of the people whom you rule badly enough, the time frame in which he lived was giving proof to the fact that the people will revolt. They will turn from you. They will move to another state. And in doing so, swell that state's numbers, and that state will simply swallow you up. And so it's not the, you know, ordained by God to be in charge. It is, you are in charge because, yes, you have the birthright and nobility to be so, but now you have to earn it as well. You need that trustworthiness. And this gets to this very fine line between this idea of obedience and speaking truth to power, as you were talking about, because remonstrating with people above you who rank above you was actually an obligation of doing what, knowing what you know and doing what's right. And he says, don't speak on what you don't know as advice to Zulu, but when you know something, speak on it. Speak on it full-throatedly, don't be unabashed and be unrelenting, but be as respectful as possible. Because if you are, you know, put to death for what you have to say, well, nobody's going to hear you. But you should be willing to risk that for the sake of upholding and sticking to what is right. So there are some very nuanced values that don't even fall cleanly within sort of a Western democratic understanding, but also not a modern authoritarian or even a, you know, fairly ancient authoritarian kingdom. You were in flux in his period of time. And that's why it is, I say again, all of this was written with the stakes being so very, very high for the ruler, for the minister who was speaking, for the student who was seeking a position. These were all things that weren't just, you know, ideologies. They were life and death sort of applications. And many, many people died in the attempt to try and apply them.
Great comments. Thank you, Aman. Next up, we have Kevin.
Yeah, appreciate the view, bring connect to the Western world, the modern world, and a great explanation. Yeah, I like it. That's my personally try. How can I apply today? Even this Chinese, I can read it. It's a different practice anymore, like compared to used to be. As maybe that day, old day like that too. They didn't practice well. However, those thought still makes sense. I would say you for example, I'm going to backward to 219. One keyword about the people. And if basic translation, the people obey you, I would say people obey and respect you. It's one thing of a difference in Eastern. We very for relationship, very important for us. We just know like use one picture for example, you can imagine people stand around. We just not myself smiling. Even though smiling, everybody's smiling because of me. I'm awesome. I feel good because I'm doing something good. So that's here's the people first about that's even pandemic. You see different strategy. Many day, we individual rights is so important, right? We going okay. Why let me wear a mask? Why you inject something to my body? Another side of the world said, oh okay. If you don't do this, don't wear a mask, you're going to could affect by yourself, it spread to others. So it's a different logical thinking. Anyway, this is too far. And for 219, I would say this is about, I consider the management, executive, even from the king. How do you select the right people work with you, for you? Normally, it's like, it's good people normally don't speak, the word is not nice. It's straightforward to the point. However, you don't like it. That's another, back to, I'm going to move to 218. 218 for me is, when we need, you see the first from, we got 2 ears, we need to hear more. Even we have down, keep it. Listen to people first, then keep your question. Don't forget question. And also, a second one is you see more. You can watch your surrounding, watch others reading books, and travel. And don't keep your question again. And we go to 1, 2 ears, 2 eyes. We go to 1 mouth. Even that, when you speak very carefully, you do what you say what you do. Let's see. I would say this one particularly speaks the characteristic, maybe a little bit biased for me. You see quite normally Eastern people, East Asia, especially, it's quiet. They don't speak. So, however, when we speak, they to the point. They try to be this. And my favorite is 17. Is 知之为知之，不知为不知，是知也. If I use my own way translate, know is verb, knowledge is noun. So knower would be knowing is knower. Don't know it. It's not a knower. That's a knowledge. For me, if I question more further, even you know it, you already know it, after a year away, maybe answer changed. Here's a even harder question, what we don't know. Normally we say we know it. I know everything. So you may heard like I used to get a manager like that. I know everything. Immediately turned me off. Okay, you know it. So by the way, I found we will bring one democracy. From this word, have we questioned this word and the activity we do? That will have that value too. If we got 2 party or 2 person, if you value your point, I vote to you. I didn't. They did another party. Actually, they win the vote, win the majority. So did you think that's a democracy? You become a minority. Thank you.
Just want to comment really briefly on something that 19 that seems to be coming back. We keep coming back to, and that is this this idea of having trustworthy people in the institutions that govern us. That is important because it instills a certain confidence that exists in the institutions that govern you. So then when you're talking about setting people straight, that if the governments are not necessarily functioning or not trustworthy, then the people themselves are not going to trust the government and they're going to act accordingly. And so I think that that's a very important point that people have mentioned on a couple of different occasions, that the importance of having virtuous people in positions of power to have, for number 19, to instill a certain confidence in the institutions that govern them. And I think that still holds true today as it did back then. I think that that's a really, when you start to undermine the trust in public officials, then you have a certain amount of chaos that will follow. Anyway, Brian, you're next.
Yeah, I would. Let's see. But yeah, I would agree with that last point in spades.
Yeah.
The thing I was going to ask about was a difference I perceived in 17 and 18. And maybe Aman has already spoken to this, but the 17, I think it has a couple things, a couple aspects to it. Number one, a person can know whether or not they know something. So you know it or you don't know it. There's no ambiguity there. But if you know it, then go ahead and hold to it and say that you know it. So that to me is it's very clear, it's very bold, kind of assertive, simple and clear. 18, I think, strikes me as being very different because it says, put aside the points of which you stand in doubt. So let's just say you don't know it. You doubt it. So that's clear enough. But then it says, while you speak cautiously at the same time of the others. These then are the things that are not in doubt. And so the things you know. But he says here to speak cautiously about the things you know. Whereas in 17, it just says to hold that you know it. My take on that is that you're even a little skeptical when you think you know something. There's always a little skepticism. There's always you're willing to entertain some doubt, whereas that's in 18 and in 17, you're not. So I just saw a difference there, and Aman did go off on that I thought he answered to some extent on the basis of Will's comments, but I would like to address that squarely.
I feel like I have to respond then, but I'll try and be more terse because I'm not a good Confucian. I'm really bad at it. One thing I would say, Brian, is you have absolutely hit upon something. There is a difference in the advice, but Zulu, or Yu Zulu, is a gentleman 9 years younger than him and a bit of a broady, outgoing, active individual, whereas Zhezhong is 48 years younger than Confucius. I almost think of it as the difference between defending a thesis versus being a tenured professor, where to step into that realm and make that defense, you are young, you are fresh, you best have every T crossed and I dotted. But once you've been at this now for a number of decades and you're secure in your position, you've got the freedom to spitball a little and speak confidently, even if you can speak confidently about something which later you have to retract and say, oh, I was wrong about that. But at the time, I absolutely believed I was right. I think that's kind of where this difference in tone of advice comes in. I don't think the advice is wholly different, but I think it's for people at different positions in their lifetime.
Yeah, that's kind of what I surmised from what you said earlier. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah,
Kevin.
a quick follow-up, the amount, yes, great point. Basically, for the Zizong is a chapter, which one's 18, I guess. It's 48 years younger. It's a young gentleman, right? So when you learn something with question, keep your question first. Try open your mind. As for Zilu is similar age with Kongzi. I know you know lots, but still, if you know it, know it. You don't know it, know it. Firm. But for me, I expand it more. Yeah. Yeah. By the way, the Chinese word called 因材施教. Basically, Confucius students, age even close to him, very young age, and it's different background, different like wealthy. So yeah, it's we can imagine the situation. Yeah, it's good to learn different students and the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Would anybody else like to comment on 17.8? Yeah, please.
No, just real quick on number 18 again. I'm sorry for commenting twice.
Please. No,
yeah. The way I interpret number 18 is kind of like advice to a consultant or a government, somebody who wants to get a government job, because this is what you're in a room, and you're gonna be an advisor, and this is what a good consultant does. A real consultant, is someone who can help others plan. So go into a company and let other people know what is correct, what is good planning, what kind of equipment to buy, what kind of projects to plan. And this is so that's the kind of advice I'm hearing here. And when he says, I just want to emphasize one point, especially when he says, listen carefully and set aside the points with which you stand in doubt. That means don't amplify untruth. Don't amplify something that might not be true. Don't or misinformation. And then the speak cautiously. I see this kind of like the idea of speaking cautiously means you're not going to start arguments. You're not going to talk above others. You're never going to be blameworthy. That's the essential point I think he's making in number one of the essential points he's making in number 18. So I just wanted to amplify that. Don't be blameworthy in your communications, in your communication style, and don't amplify questionable facts. Thank you.
No, I think that's a great point, because that also goes to another aspect of it, which is actually how to build relationships. It allows you to build effective relationships. When you're basically speaking cautiously, you will no longer have any regrets about what you say, but also conversely, you're actually listening more. which is something you're taking in information, and that's the facilitates any type of relationship that you're building with others as well. It also, on a personal level, will enhance your own personal communication skills and your own level of understanding of a specific topic. So I think knowing when to speak, and this directly relates to 17 as well, is a form of wisdom. And it also means something deeper. It means you're self-aware. When to speak and when not to speak means that your ego isn't necessarily dominating the conversation itself. So that's another important point when you're conversing with other people and establishing a rapport with them, that you're speaking with them, it's more of an honest dialogue that is taking place, because it's not your own personal ego that's you're speaking out of, speaking about something that you don't know. So I think that's another those are really great points, James. And those are some of the things that I highlighted as well. So next up, I have Suki.
Hi, great discussion. In my translation, the 17, it said to say that you know something when you know it, to say that you do not know something when you do not know it. I know the to say that part actually is a kind of add-on, but I like the add-on because it creates more use case. Because sometimes when I'm with myself, I know I know something, or I know I don't know something. But Confucius always teaches how to act in relationship with other people. You are not just learn that in your study room. You need to use that in a real situation, in an organization, in conversation. So for even for me, if sometimes to save my face, to want to make me feel better, or I want to make other people to see me in more smart kind of way, I might still say something I don't know, but I still want to sound like I know something. So I think I love the way it said to say that you know something when you know. I think it's very important, because sometimes we, especially I, sometimes are good at self-deception, self dishonest. Yeah, so I like to point out that. Zilu, from some of his background, he was supposed to quick to take offense and quick to act. So that's also because sometimes we want to be smart, right? And we want to very quick to respond. But normally the way is to, I know, or this is what it was. So I think that speak very interesting to his personality. And also at the 18, that's Zhang, and he was very clever, very articulate, very sharp, but his classmates thought him arrogant. So that's why Confucius said, try to speak something you are sure, so you don't offend people. So that also is a very good example. Teach different stuff, catering to one's personality. But I also want to push back a little bit, because that to me that's the bad part of only speak the good, only want to save face, only even in too extreme, like in Chinese culture, even Chinese company, they just tend to limit any chance to get wrong. So they don't want to really tackle the difficult question or difficult conversation. But sometimes if we don't want to talk about these things in a skillful way, because here Confucius just said, don't even mention it. Try to focus on the positive, the things you're more sure, right? But for me, I feel like to make real progress for a organization, especially a big organization. Sometimes you need to have that kind of difficult conversation, or at least people need to have some conversation skills to learn how to articulate a question might make people feel uncomfortable. But that's the skill I don't think Confucius want to spend any effort. All he taught was just keep your job, be safe. Yeah, that kind of safe route on some occasions can help you keep your salary, but for long term or for more reformal stuff, because I don't think in China we are good at reforms. All the change is from wars or revolutions. It's like until it's bad, until the worst case, people could not understand anymore. There's a dramatic uphill, so people suffer a lot. We don't like to fine tune little bit self-correction. That's not in our DNA. So that's something I want to push back. I don't think it's really it's 100% helpful, especially in modern society, modern organization. Also, the 19 his name means morning. I want to remind us that name was the name when he was people give him when he was dead. So in Chinese, we give people name after they are died. So that's why Chinese of Confucius really value what other people's opinion. I think for me, it's a double-edged sword, because you want to please people. You care much about how people give you a name based on what you did in your life, even you are already dead. So that name, the morning was the definition of his whole life. So that's a very interesting culture thinking. So that's why you can also understand why people don't want to offend other people, don't want to have difficult conversation, because they don't want to, at the end of the day, have some bad names or bad stories. People want to associate their names. Yeah. But unfortunately for him, it's a very saddening, because he didn't do a very good job. Yeah, that's something I want to add. Thank you.
Very, very good comments. One of the things that it is true, there's one thing to speak when you know something, but it's quite another not to speak and not ask questions and not make mistakes as well. That can be equally as detrimental. You don't want to speak with any kind of authority, but when you don't know something, but you do want to at least engage in conversation. So Aman, do you have any comments on Suki's?
Yeah, I really like Suki's analysis, and I appreciate what you had to say. And I just want to push back a little. What you're saying about the imperative to not speak when you don't know, that very much is the cultural norm that you see in modern China and in many modern Chinese enterprises, because that's the selected lessons of Confucianism that really benefited both the state and the educational system of China to enforce those lessons. But it's interesting that in her translation, it says to say that you know when you know as one of those two directives, because classically, that wasn't the entire lesson. The entire lesson was not, keep your mouth shut when you're uncertain. The entire lesson was, don't make waves needlessly. Don't, like James was saying, don't engage in stirring the pot, creating the controversy, but do speak up on what you are certain of. And that was something, again, cost Confucius's job, Confucius's job. It was the flip side aspect of this obedience and deference to authority that existed so deeply in his lessons, was it is also incumbent upon those who are under that authority to speak truly, even if it is at the risk of your own life, your own well-being. You know, if there's actually a chapter later where I think it's in book 12, where the question comes up. So if you've got to choose, the paraphrases, if you have to choose between your life and trustworthiness, what's the right choice? And he says, you sacrifice your life every time. Trustworthiness is so much more paramountly important. And that trustworthiness includes speaking to those who aren't trustworthy when they're failing to do a good job. It is a son's duty to correct his parents if they are flagging. He's supposed to do it with great deference, with all due respect, but he is supposed to stay on it. This was one of the lessons that existed within this framework of the Analects and later Confucian teachings that was intentionally neglected by authority structures because it didn't serve their purposes very well. Mencius was really kind of pushed aside with some of those stories about him telling, leaders what a horrible job they were doing, because they didn't want some of these young students getting, any big ideas. But this tradition of remonstration does exist. It's not to the surface. It is much more, behind closed doors, in a way that you do not cause the other person to lose face when you do it, but you still need to do it because it is your duty. And even if it means your death, or in Sima Chan's case, your castration, you do what needs to be done to be good to your word.
Excellent. Thank you, Aman. That was a great summary. Is there anyone else that wishes to comment on 17, 18, or 19? Will, go right ahead.
Yeah, I really thought Suki's comments were very interesting, and
Yes.
it reminded me of I think Mark Zuckerberg's quote of his, move fast and break stuff or something. But Confucius is definitely no, he's not. That's not his approach. He errs on the side of caution, and get all your information as perfect as you can, and then still move slow. Is the sense I got from 218. And it just also, it's been mentioned, the Warring States period. I find all this stuff so interesting, whether you agree with Confucius or not. Just we don't live in the Warring States period, but these are pretty I don't know, unsure times geopolitically, and so thinking about all these things, I think could not be more relevant, right now, just with so much unsurety in the world, which is very much the case of what the times Confucius lived in. So thank you.
Thank you, Will. Okay, why don't we move on in order to, I want to be mindful of Aman's time here, and move on to the next group. So would anybody like to read chapters 20, 21, and 22 of their version of the Analects?
I can read them.
That'd be wonderful.
Okay.
Aman, is that a good
yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Through 2021 or 22, or should we go further?
I think we could go to the end, but it really, either way works for me. I would almost vote read through to 24.
Okay,
because then you get a block,
yeah,
and then we can spend the time talking about all of it.
Sounds good. All right, so why don't we go through 20 through 24?
Okay. Number 20. Zhikang, this is the Lege translation. Zhikang asked how to cause the people to reverence their ruler, to be faithful to him, and to go on to nerve themselves in virtue. The master said, quote, "Let him preside over them with gravity, then they will reverence him. Let him be final and kind to all. Then they will be faithful to him. Let him advance the good and teach the incompetent. Then they will eagerly seek to be virtuous." Number 21. Someone addressed Confucius saying, "Sir, why are you not engaged in the government?" The master said, "What does the Shu Jing say of filial piety? You are filial. You discharge your brotherly duties. These qualities are displayed in government. This then also constitutes the exercise of government. Why must there be that, making one be in the government?" Wow, that's pretty deep. Number 22. The master said, "I do not know how a man without truthfulness is to get on. How can a large carriage be made to go without the crossbar for yoking the oxen to? Or a small carriage without the arrangement for yoking the horses?" 23. Zhizhang asked whether the affairs of 10 ages after could be known. Confucius said, "The Yin dynasty followed the regulations of the Jia, wherein it took from or added to them may be known. The Zhao dynasty has followed the regulations of Yin, wherein it took from or added to them may be known. Some other may follow the Zhu, but though it should be at the distance of 100 ages, its affairs may be known." Number 24. The master said, "For a man to sacrifice to a spirit which does not belong to him is flattery. To see what is right and not to do it is want of courage."
Thank you for that. Fantastic. I very much appreciate that, James. Would anybody else like to read their version of verses 20 through 24? Oh, Will? Okay. Go right ahead.
All right.
I know Jason really likes your translation too.
Okay, 220. Zhikang asked, "What drives people to be reverent, loyal, and mutually encouraging?" The master said, "If you demonstrate gravity when dealing with them, they will be reverent. If you become filial and benevolent, they will be loyal. If you raise up the able to instruct those who are not, they will be mutually encouraging." 221. Someone said to Confucius, "Sir, why do you not take charge of government?" The master replied, "Document says, be filial, only be filial, and be friendly to your brothers. You can extend this to the administration of your office. This is also taking charge of governing. Why must I take charge of governing otherwise?" 222. The master said, "If a person is not trustworthy, I do not know how he can get on. A big cart without a clamp, or a small cart without a collar bar, how can it be made to go?" 223. Zizhang asked, "Can we know what 10 ages hence will be like?" The master said, "The yin followed the rituals of the xia, and what has been removed and added is known to us. The zhou followed the rituals of the yin, and what has been removed and added is known to us. Should there be by any chance any state that succeeds the zhou, even 100 ages hence can be foreknown." 224. The master said, "To sacrifice to spirits that do not belong to you is flattery. Failing to take action when you see what is right is want of courage." Thanks.
Thank you. That was actually surprisingly close to the previous translation as well. Suki, would you like to read as well?
Sure. 20. And Ji Kangzi asked, "How can I get the common people to be respectful, to do their best, and to encourage each other to strive forward?" The master said, "Oversee the people with dignity, and the people will be respectful. Honor the elderly, cherish the young, and the people will do their best. Acknowledge the good, teach the incompetent, and the people will encourage each other to strive forward." 21. Someone said to Confucius, "Why do you not take part in government?" The master said, "The book of documents says, filial, only be filial, and a friend to your older and younger brothers. This has an influence on the way of government. To do this is to take part in government. Why must I take on a position in order to take part in government?" 22. The master said, "If a person does not have the trust of others, I don't see how he can get anywhere. A large cart without a linchpin in its yoke bar, and a small cart without a linchpin in its collar bar. How can you get them to go anywhere?" 23. Zizhang asked, "Can we know what things will be like 10 generations from now?" The master said, "The yin followed the rites of the xia, and what was added and subtracted can be known. The zhou followed the rites of the yin, and what was added and subtracted can be known. Whoever succeeds the zhou, even 100 generations from now, will be able to know what was added and subtracted from the rites of the zhou." 24. The master said, "To offer sacrifice to spirits who are not your ancestors is ingratiating.
Ingratiation?
Yeah, ingratiating. Faced with what is right, yet doing nothing about it shows a lack of courage." Thank you for helping me to pronounce that. Thank you. Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Suki. And that is a challenging word, so no worries at all. Aman, would you like to share yours? Share your translation.
Absolutely. And thank you, all three of you. I enjoyed all of those readings. I always enjoyed James Legge, as I mentioned before, it being the earliest English translation. I'm always struck by it. What he did was really quite remarkable. 220. Ji Kongzi asked, "How can I make people respectful, loyal, and diligent?" The master said, "If you approach them with dignity, the people will be respectful. If you are shao," I'm not going to read all the parentheticals, "and zi, the people will be loyal. If you promote the good people and teach the incapable ones, the people will be diligent." 2021. Someone asked Confucius, "Why are you not in politics?" The master said, "The book of documents said, Practice shall in the family, befriend the old and the young. Apply this principle in politics. This is also a way in politics. Why do I need to be in politics? 2022, the master said, a person without trustworthiness, who knows what he is good for? A large cart without a crossbar or a small cart without a yoke, how can it go? 2023, Zhizhong asked, are the affairs of the next 10 eras knowable? The master said, Yin followed the Li of Xia. Their differences are knowable. Zhou followed the Li of Yin. That should be read as, sorry, I have to edit as I go.
It's quite all right. It's actually a privilege to be able to.
Zhou followed the Li of Yin. Their differences are knowable. In this way, what continues from Zhou, even for 100 eras, is knowable. And 2024, the master said, offering sacrifices to the deaths of those who are irrelevant to you is flattery. Failing to act on what you should do is lacking courage. There are some nice answers to questions we were asking earlier in all of this, and I'll get to them in a moment, but I have to take a moment to point out that this word, 字, this is the only occasion this word is used in the entirety of the Analects. Jason interprets it as being loving of your sons, which I understand where he comes up with that translation, and this is his translation. I have to respect it, but I do disagree with it. I think here, because the word 子 actually in this context refers to love. Actually, let's see if I can pull it out here. I think it is an expansion. I think that what he's doing is, having spoken just before of shao, he then speaks of 子 as sort of a more ecumenical loving and devotion to people. So we're in slight disagreement on exactly what he means here, but this is why I do think retaining some of the original Chinese is so valuable, and making the demand on the person to do the investigation to understand it more deeply. Because, as I said at our first meetup in this, there are a lot of times where terms are used by Confucius that may seem familiar, but he may be applying them in a slightly different way. And I used a term like the English liberty or our idea of freedom as words that everyone understands, but everyone has a slightly different interpretation of. And this is one of those occasions. Now, outside of the actual nitty-gritty of translating, here we have again asking how to make people follow you. And the master, Confucius' response is, approach them with dignity, and they'll be respectful. Show them shao, show them 子, and they'll be loyal. And promote the good and teach the incapable. This is, once again, this idea of how do I become a good leader? And as we've all probably experienced, if you've lived long enough, you've had the experience of someone who was a really good leader, whether that was a good teacher, a good manager, a good whomever, commanding the respect and admiration of the people that they were leading. And it isn't necessarily because of the title they held on their name tag or, that came after their name. It had everything to do with their approach to being in the situation with others. Sometimes this lesson can also be teased out by watching somebody who's had a leadership fail, and you've just watched them botch it terribly. And And that doesn't follow a rule book. It's a matter of circumstance, and it's a matter of disposition. And sometimes I'm thinking of teachers, and I'm looking at a mirror right now, losing control of a classroom. It's a question of whether you were having an off day or not. And those are learning moments that you can take from and go, oh, yeah, I can't approach that like that. I need to remember to approach it the way I did before when I was more successful. To Will's earlier statement about he doesn't seem bitter about failing at his endeavor, I think 21 addresses that when it says, why aren't you in politics? And he talks about shao as being the application or the principles of all politics. And that therefore, as long as he is keeping good to practicing shao, he is being political. It's almost that idea that I hate to sound like I'm pulling a soundbite from political ads of the early 90s, but family values are a political statement, I think was one of the memes back then. And I do think Confucius would absolutely have agreed with that. 22, the supremacy of character. A person who isn't trustworthy is like a cart without a crossbar or a small cart without a yoke. It's showy and useless. 23, I find very interesting, and I don't know that this necessarily was a original saying of Confucius. It feels like something that may have been added later, much later, by students who were seeking to demonstrate his prescience. But if it was his original words, then he was really insightful in being able to say, history is a teacher that allows us to look to the future. And by example, we have a pretty good outline of how things will continue. And in terms of just China, he was absolutely correct, because it's overly simplistic to say after, the Qin dynasty and the rise of the Han and the fall of the Han and the rise of the Sui and the fall of the, it's just more of the same. I mean, that's an incredible oversimplification, but it does seem to follow a pattern of dynasties able to seize power but not rule well, and others able to rule for a very long time and go into periods of decline. And the pattern of Chinese history just follows. And when he talks about the Shang to the Sha to the Zhou, he's talking about an expanse of millennia. And so his argument here is we can see the pattern from millennia ago, and we can forecast that to patterns millennia hence. And lastly, 24, talking about offering as being irrelevant and flattering. This really smacks to people who say, well, Confucius was just a ritual fetishist. Here's his argument saying, no, if the ritual doesn't mean anything to you, if it's irrelevant to you, then you shouldn't do it. But if there's something you should do, i.e. speaking up to a lord or taking the risk of your own life to speak truth, if you fail to do so, you show a lack of courage. And being courageously and totally devoted to the pursuits of fostering healthier social relation was of the utmost importance to Confucius, no matter what the cost personally.
Thank you, Aman. There's obviously quite a bit that we can go over with this particular passage, or these passages, I should say. Interestingly enough, I actually thought of Shrikant with number 20, with the type of leader that actually kind of pulls up everybody and helps those who kind of raises the bar for everyone in many ways. So anyway, before I go on talking about my impacts or my thoughts on all these, why don't we go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat to share your takeaways from verses 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24. James.
Okay, I found a couple of these difficult. Number 20.
Yes.
I wrote, having gravity engenders reverence. Being filial and kind engenders loyalty. By advancing the good and teaching the incompetent, people are persuaded to seek virtue. So these are public virtues that I think are being mentioned by Confucius. The teaching the incompetent, advancing the good, which he mentioned previously in this chapter, and of course being filial and kind, which always engenders loyalty. And then that comes up again in number 21, which is the what does the government have to do with this? Well, I think this idea is that when you are filial, you're doing what's right in the family. You're helping your brothers and so forth. And that's and he said, and he kind of says, well, that's exactly the same kind of thing the government needs to do. And then it seems to get so I think what his point is that when someone is, and then he says something that sounds a little bit ridiculous, which is that's why you dodge being in the government, because you're already filial, and that's what the government needs to do. So you don't mess with the government. But I think his point, which is really hard to get, is too subtle, is that when you are filial, you're actually helping the government indirectly. In other words, you're creating a society where being filial is what is expected of one. Therefore, the government, by acclamation, needs to be filial also. That's my take on 21. 22. Truthfulness is a necessary component of all projects. I think, and this one was difficult for me too, but I realize now that truth is kind of the crossbar. It's just like it's an allegory. So truth is the crossbar, and in order for the carriage or the vehicle to work, you have to have truth. So that's the allegory. I like it. It's simple and but difficult for English speakers perhaps. And then the 23 is the one I kind of hate secretly, because predestination, social predestination happens. People do these rituals, and then they can expect their children to do them, and the society will just continue on the same way for hundreds and hundreds of years. And this happened in Western, not just in China, but it happened in Western civilization too. We had the Christianity installed after the Roman Empire, and then the Dark Ages. The things started just continued along very slowly until probably around the 11th and 12th century. Philosophy began to change, and people who were critical thinkers began to emerge inside the church. Their critical thinking started to emerge inside the church, and you began to have changes not just in the church but in society, because these documents became known all over in the both in the Muslim civilization and then and also in the Christian civilization. So that was kind of there was a kind of a pre-Renaissance, and that was very nice change after about 600 years of bad luck, right, for the poor Christians in Europe. And maybe the Crusades had something to do with it. I don't know. So this Chinese idea of things are determined by past rituals, and there are profits and losses. Don't forget those; they happen. And who does things, the Hegelian history, concept of history, and the reasons for succession, why things follow each other. So he's kind of being a little scientific, I think, but at the same time, it points to the kind of like the Chinese custom of expecting tomorrow to be like today, I think a little bit too much. And then 24, I got to see what is right and not to do it shows a want of courage. So that's just the end of it. And then it's similar to, and the other, there's a metaphor in there, and that's the idea of sacrificing to a random ghost by flattery. So, like in other words, I'm going to do a sacrifice, but it's not to my ancestors. It's not to a better life. We're not toasting tomorrow. We're not, saluting the moon or the sun or anything like that. It's just, it's somebody else's random ghost. We're gonna have a ritual to that we don't even understand. So he's just kind of like saying, don't go for random rituals. Rituals are fine. He really believes in rituals, and perhaps today we should more. But this idea of picking a random object to worship is a bit absurd. I think that's what he's pointing to.
Yeah, it's not just ritual for ritual's sake.
Yeah.
There's this, and that is problematic many times, and especially when you're talking about dogmatic religions or kind of practices, where people start to focus more on the practice than actually what its function is supposed to be serving. So what the ritual is supposed to be representing and actually doing. So we had covered some of these things when we were actually studying the Bible. Interestingly enough, how in many times that Christ would criticize leaders of the day primarily because they were following rituals, but not necessarily living the values that the rituals were supposed to be representing. So the same thing, I think, holds true with this particular instance. I really liked your point, especially about number 21. And I might even ask you to come back to it a little bit later about how the good behavior actually helps the government. And it's because, to me, I understand the point, right? You do the right thing no matter what your role is in society. And that makes for a functional society overall. Because because you're not in politics doesn't mean you get a pass. Right. And I think that's a really important point. So this gets into something that we talked about in the past in other groups, maybe the idea of role ethics. That your role is to do what you're supposed to do, no matter what, and be ethical, no matter what part of society you're in. And that makes for a functional society. It's a very kind of cosmopolitan approach to the world.
But Confucius has this key ethic of being filial. So I really appreciate it. Maybe it's because I'm at the age I'm at, but yeah. The idea that if people are filial, that ensures the welfare, helps ensure the welfare of their family, and they learn to respect up and respect down, which is a key to being an exponent of virtue in society. Always respect up and respect down. Yeah, so I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, there was not to go on, but there was a saying, and I just don't recall it off the top of my head, basically, where Confucius goes through how to change society, and then it eventually just speaks to the idea of changing himself. But he talks about changing his family, changing his way at home, and these almost concentric circles as a way of how he would interact with the world. But I think Jason had mentioned that's his grandson, that or somebody, a descendant of Confucius, that said that, not Confucius himself. But it's a very, very, very well-known quote. Anyway, so great comments, James, as always. Very much appreciated. And so next up, I have Kevin, followed by Will.
Thank you, guys. From 220, it's and I would say it's worth speak again about filial and loving. Here I know among pinpoint love in Western world is from between the partner. However, yes, if you think about in China culture, could be loving is from the elderly love the kids, parent, and another way filial is from this young people, how you respect the elderly is called 孝. Another way around in verse is 慈. So you also kind of put it together. For example, as adult, 40 or 30 to 50, you got your parents, also you got a son. So you apply this practice both. 孝 to your parents and 慈 to your kids. So that's for 220. 221 for me is logic. I'm going to use Chinese. Later on, they developed a base is called 平生修家 治国平天下. 平生, basically you try learn yourself and they basically you make yourself better, then you help your family, then you could lead the country, then you lead the world. This kind of for people that lead, that means control, is you benefit for yourself, your family, your country, the world. That's the logic. It seems that, normally we consider modern days, show filial. Filial is only for your parents. You see, they have also follow this logic. For your brother, sister, and they also, he consider, doesn't mean I have to be officer. I had to, this in politics. I'm in the politics because I feel serve with my family, myself, my students. So that's the logic, very interesting logic. 220, that's one word, 姓. I'm going to put this one, basically the person plus the word.
Are you on 20 right now?
22.
All right. Yeah. Okay. I thought you said 20.
222 about the word is called, if equal to it's trust. It's this one word. 人, they first 人而无信. Xing is so important. Normally, the very interesting traditional old days, don't we have contract left? If you guys remember in Dao, they have left part or right part. You're gonna sort of split. Then that's later on. Even for family, we base the words. Based what you do is based on trust. You don't need to write it down. Mm-hmm. So that's here they use the two metaphorical. You need a big cart. You need a car spur. If you don't have that, wheel not turn. So also yoke for smaller car. That. And 223 got one question based on my reading. The sort of 10 generation. 4, that's 4 is maybe 30 years. 10 multiple 30, which means 300. I'm also later on people translate that with originally like that. Based Chinese history, actually is 300 each dynasty, almost 300. That's a longer one.
So wait a minute, So to clarify, each dynasty was about 300 years.
Yes, you're right. Yes, here it's like you can see, if based now 4季, 一个4季 maybe 100, 10,000, but and what's yeah, like 10 era is for, yeah, based my, I'm not sure this is 30, based my reading is 30 years, 10 means 300. And the last one, another one, very interested. I'm, trying not to just read the text. I'm above the text. Try to. It's another one. If you are the filial, if you good for parents, good for your kids, do it now. Don't let your parents pass away. Oh my God, I need to do something. I need for ritual. I would consider both ritual. Ritual, let's say you treat a loved one, and also do something good. It's both ritual. So why you wait? Do it now. And no, don't select something in the past you try to regret or you try praise. Do it serve now. That's the last one. 介意不为无永矣, so lack of courage. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Made some fantastic points as well. At some point, I want to come back to the importance of trust in number 22, but I'll let Will speak first.
Thanks. As far as, let's see, 220, I believe that word ci is translated as benevolent in mine, but usually benevolent is rin, and so I don't know what the difference here is between ci and rin, and why rin wasn't used.
Maybe really quickly we could Aman.
Yeah, I put in the chat just as an illustration of this unique use of this word. It does mean something like benevolence. It can mean kind is another way to describe it, humane or merciful. It doesn't, but the components of it are the heart now. And I find that fascinating because this is that word that Jason and I were disagreeing over. He's interpreting it as being the inverse of shao, as being the love that parents would feel towards children as opposed to the loving respect that children should feel towards parents. I understand where he has that interpretation. I see it as Confucius expanding on the idea of shao as sort of the filial or family loyalties and love then being extended to a greater sphere of influence, so that you extend your heart to whom you are in the presence of now. That's my personal opinion. But why exactly the choice to use 字 here as opposed to a word like 仁, which we've come to see as benevolence and human-heartedness again and again through the Analects? It's something of a mystery.
I would like to add I would like to translate into compassion. Also that this Chinese word original means help others to grow. So it's benevolent. It's like help the grass to grow. In the higher part of this character has a grass meaning. So I feel like it's xiao is more towards people higher, like a higher hierarchy, like your parents, like you show respect for, and compassion is for people who are a little lower than you. So that's why kids or someone not as strong as you, but you still show compassion, or someone is having some difficulty, so you help them to grow like the way you help a grass. Grass is tender, so you want to do something to help the grass grow. So I will translate into compassion, and also in modern Chinese, that words also translate into compassion.
Oh, okay. That's actually, and it goes with the
I would add it
with the
is compassion is very close, a little bit everything, kind of, a little bit mixed, a little bit loving and also compassion. More on compassion.
Yeah, loving and compassion together.
Yeah,
combine loving and compassion.
You have to describe the meaning. If you use simple this word, yeah, it's not straightforward. Thank you.
But it works with the passage, loving and compassion. So I do like that, especially the way Suki described it. I'm sorry, Will, too. It was an interesting.
No,
forth,
thank you all for that. Those insights. One other thing on 223. I have this commentary by the Korean scholar, and I also have, I think I have Suki's translation, which has some commentary by Anping Chen. Both of those, it seems like there's a lot of argument about whether or not it's referring to predicting the future. This one that I have seems to say something like the rituals of the Zhou were so perfected that they wouldn't show flaws until 100 generations, or that if you followed the Zhou's rituals, if they were followed perfectly, you could predict the future 100 generations out, but only if they were followed perfectly. So it seems like just a particularly ambiguous line there in the last sentence, I guess, of 223. Thanks.
Thank you, Will, as well. Does anybody wish to comment on Will's the last sentence comment? I don't have anything to add to that.
I would only say that it may well be a apt interpretation of that passage. Confucius was, while he's accused of being a fetishist for ritual, he certainly was a fetishist of the early Zhou dynasty. He saw it as the most perfected point of existence in known Chinese history to that point. And so it's entirely possible that this passage is an extolling of those virtues. But again, and this goes to opinion, it very much felt to me as if this was a much later addition to the Analects, that it was done to show off the master's great prescience, his great foresight, his great ability to sort of get in an "I told you so." But I can't prove that. It's just the impression I get when I've read it in the past.
Thank you, Mon. Next up, we have Brian.
So on 23, I really like the image that was evoked for, my translation says truthfulness, but I think trustworthiness might be, I heard that as well. I think that might be better. That
the 22 or 23?
23.
Okay.
I think, yeah, 23. And no, it's 22.
Yeah.
22. And the image I get is that, the participation of others depends on their the trustworthiness that you can evoke. And it's something that's, you know, obviously tested over time. The other thing I liked was, or that I was reminded of in let me make sure I get the numbers right. In 21, this phrase that Jason used, which was the Confucian Revolution, the idea that the common people would be invited, encouraged, inspired to participate in Li, the ritual, but I think also in Chow, instead of being subject to punishment. And that was, he presented that as something of a political revolution, because in the past, only the nobility were governed through Li. To me, it seems like this is a recognition that, and a calling to all Chinese at all levels, commoner and nobility, to exercise Chow, and that in doing that, it's a political act, an important political act. So that's, those are my two thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to come back to the importance of trustworthiness as well, since trust is like kind of the basis of all society. If you don't have it, then you essentially everything breaks down. It's almost why, you know, you have this categorical imperative, if you're a Kantian or something, that you always have to tell the truth. There's an underlying principle there that you tell the truth, because it's imperative that you have this trust that exists in society. If everybody were lying, then the society would actually fall apart. So if you're talking about its importance to commerce as well, in order to have any kind of trade, you have to trust the person that you're trading with. So I think that's, you know, for me, that particular passage, you know, when you're talking about leadership or anything on lines of some of the things that we've discussed here this evening, that you have to trust the person that's either saying something, and then you have to trust the people to actually execute whatever, you know, that is being, whatever the laws are to act in accordance with the laws. It's just we've covered this as well in the Tao. So it's something that, you know, is kind of fundamental to society in general. Does anybody else have any other comments that they wish to add? I want to let's see if oh, Dave, forgive me.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I've enjoyed sitting in, and I agree or admit I don't have the book yet. I'm going to check with the library. But just a comment, because I think we're about 100 generations later, that it's interesting in antiquity, some of these people like Confucius or Stoicism kind of figured out life. But it's good to treat everyone with dignity and respect. And I think that's one thing we found reinforced with the virus. We discovered the frontline workers that I think everyone used to consider, oh, they're just the little people. We just ignore them. And, you know, I can feel superior by treating them like dirt. No, if we treated everyone, gosh, even people with different skin tones, with dignity and respect, God, we might have a little better world. But thanks, everyone. It's been a great evening.
Thank you, Dave. I completely agree. So why don't we have Amand and Suki?
Oh no, ladies first.
Oh,
We'll bring chivalry back for Confucius.
Thank you.
And forgive me, Suki, for actually not being chivalrous.
Yeah, I do like the one he said, like the take care of your family first and do your relationship work at family first. So I almost feel like if he's teaching now, feels like he's the self improvement kind of people write things. And he always choose the most difficult relationship, ask us to work with. How you treat your parents, how you treat your siblings. These are the main suffering a lot of people feel, and we blame these relationships bring us miserable in our whole life. But he works around it. It's like you have to work with the most difficult relationship in order to have a sense of peace, have a sense of dignity, sense of honest gratitude. There's an interesting saying, like if you see you are a kind person, if you want to see if you are enlightened, spend 2 weeks with your parents. So that's exactly the training, the practice. Always work towards the thing you feel difficult. And also one thing is another thing, like there are a lot of people work in political public area, but they have miserable family. Their kids suffering a lot. They may say love, say these very gradual concept, work in a government or you work in a political opposition, but their family is as the totally opposite. So that's why Confucius wants us to be true with your own resources, how you can train yourself to be a better, more compassionate people. It's like if you want to change the world, make your bed first, something like that. So I really feel it's very relevant for the modern world. Thank you.
Thank you, Suki. Very, very well said. Aman.
Now I'm going to feel guilty anytime I rush off the phone with my mother. Thank you, Suki. Yes, you make a very salient point. These are some of the most challenging interactions that most of us will ever have, or with the people closest to us. And I think that was something of the heart of Confucius's teachings on leadership, is that you need to be that invested in those that you lead as well. The only other thing I wanted to remind everybody of two things really, and then I've got to sign off and say goodnight. But one was something about this work has made it stick so deeply and so profoundly that Sir Alfred Whitehead once was quoted as saying all of philosophy are footnotes to Plato, but apparently he never crossed the Ural Mountains, because in the East, all of Eastern thought are footnotes to Confucius. And there is something in these Analects that really has spurred that much thought and concentration. And you don't get it in one go. You don't get it in two. You don't get it in three. I'm still digging at times to try and see what's the profundity here. What made this simple idea of respect or trustworthiness or decency to your family so profound and so world-changing an idea as it was in the East? The only other thing I was going to mention was there's been a lot of talk about updating these sort of ideas into a contemporary notion of, in any organization, which we can say and mean, but there was no organization, there was no enterprise that was not the state in his time. It was the one and only thing worth doing. Merchants were somewhat reviled by Confucians later in life. And so ideas like business or commerce or nonprofits, or those did not really factor in. Everything was subservient to the one singular goal of good governance. And that really is heart and center of Confucius' teachings, is how to get good governance from these lessons. They believed they could do it, and if nothing else, they had enduring governance for, like I said, millennia and a half. So there was something to this, and as much as it may not be my cup of tea, I'm glad that I'm delving in to tackle this challenging text. And I thank you all. And Suki, please never talk to my mother, I will labor under guilt for generations. But thank you for your insights. Were quite shocking. I appreciate you all. I've got to run. Thanks again. I will see you all. I'll be here next Tuesday, and hopefully Jason will be back and able to speak to his own work.
Yes, and thank you for joining us and for standing in for Jason so admirably, as you always do in your comments. And they're most welcome. And I think that you raised one of the most important questions that we can kind of explore here together, is that what has made this work one of the most profound,
before you go, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Well, yes.
What's the nali mean in English?
Oh,
explain to folks.
Not worthy, I believe, right?
It's
bear,
it's just the. What's that?
It direct translation where? Why? How do you explain? It's hard. So you cannot use one single words like word apple to apple translate sometimes. That's one of them.
No, it doesn't translate. Literally, it doesn't translate. It's just a whole word of, not so, not so, not so.
It's a
kind of
sentiment. Humble way to
yes.
say, yeah.
Yes. And in that same vein, my favorite parting in Mandarin is "mamanzo," which is walk slowly.
Mamanzo.
So, mamanzo.
Walk slowly.
I will see you all next week.
I'll see you next week. Thank you, Aman.
Yeah.
All
right. So we have Kevin next, actually.
I got a quick summary for, until now, we learned 2 chapter or volume of 20. So it's so beautiful. And if I quickly look through the chapter 1 and 2, if you think about it, quickly see the chapter 1, 学而时习之，不亦乐乎. Learning is happiness. It's happy, right? And the last one, 16, don't worry about it. People don't know you. Worry about you don't know people. That if you talk about leadership, that's about the leadership. And by the way, leadership for me, I don't know personally, a little bit overvalue over here in Confucius. No, lead yourself. Be good yourself. Then you do, you spread from your family, friends. Then you expand. If you cannot make a good person, how can I lead a good country or team? So it's a very interesting way to see that. Thank you.
I'd just be interested, actually, if anybody is willing to answer. What are you getting from Confucius after the first 2 books? I'd be interested in hearing anybody's comments along those lines.
I'm getting realism, a certain kind of a sense of realism, a kind of a lot of respect. I'm certainly getting the filial point, the fact that Heidegger talks about this. He talks about there's a section in Being in Time where he talks about the connection that we have with our ancestors. He's talking about a different philosopher. He's talking about philosophers that came before him that were interested in the vertical connection that people have with their ancestors in historicity. And it comes off a little bit like conservatism. In other words, we live in this kind of fast-paced modern liberal society. But if we go back to Confucius, he's talking about the connection, the vertical connections we have in time with our ancestors and with our future offspring who are going to eventually outlive us, and so forth. So these are material for a lot of people. These are the material connections that they have in time with other people. They're not authors of books or creators of new machines. The products that everyone has in common is essentially our genetics. So,
Right.
So I think that's a major point that I really love. That the idea of truth being paramount virtue. There's not, and everything is like I said, it's all material, and it's and I see it. I'm an ex-consultant. I'm a software guy. I was an ex-consultant, and I see it all kind of like a lot of it is instructions to consultants. In other words, don't talk above others. Make sure that you don't represent any facts that are untrustworthy, like you said, and this idea of being filial and compassionate spreads around. So he understood an awful lot about ethics, and it shows a connection between his time and ours. We still do have these same ethics. They weren't invented by Plato like a lot of people think. A lot of them were well known by Confucius, and perhaps much better put than Socrates had endeavored to, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that you said. I mean, I'm getting very much a feeling of, an element of respect and familiar respect specifically. But one of the things that actually is kind of just struck me tonight is the most, I guess, profound passage that I found, and as far as with Confucius, maybe it's not the most profound, but the one that's a little bit different that made me think a little bit differently about what we've read thus far was number 24, where he wasn't as focused on the rituals as much as being focused on the virtue itself, because I'd gotten very strong feeling of this respect for ritual all the way up until that passage, even how to honor your mother and father for a certain period of time for 3 years, and that there was this profound respect for just again the hierarchies and your family. That was surprising. But what I am seeing here is that he really did capture virtues very clearly. But I do still get a very different feeling than the Tao, than when we covered the Tao. It's much more structured and much more ordered and practical. So I think that there's that aspect of it.
I'd like to say something about ritual. I think this is not like the Greeks. So the Greeks, the society perhaps of the Greeks probably went back about as far. We know about some 6th century BCE philosophers in the Greek islands, but what they were concerned with were polytheistic myths mostly. They had emerged out of animalism perhaps, and they merged into a polytheistic society at a very high level. They created statues and beautiful statues and so forth, and paintings even of their gods, and they believed in an alternate reality, a God reality and a human reality. The Chinese didn't have this. They had this connection with the ancestors. So you have to put it in that context, that this is an early society and they're looking for connections. And so, which is like the meaning of the word religion, right? Connecting things. Yeah. So this looking for connections took different forms in separated societies. So the Chinese society gives us one example of forms of ancestor worship and ritual. And then the Greek society came up with forms of ritual that were based on mythologies. So I think so the West and the East developed along those two different tracks, let's say. So I think that's a very good area for study. I think religion is kind of like this big, kind of like whirlpool of interesting places to gather ideas from.
Yeah, it'll be even more interesting as we go along to actually kind of compare and contrast those two different models that that were developed, one through myth, and then this, one through family or genetics, or essentially, and that's going to be very interesting to explore as we go further. Does anybody? That was fantastic, James, and thank you. Does anybody else wish? Go ahead, Brian.
Well, you asked impressions. It's not a summary, but an observation that's kind of surprised me is that Confucius was speaking directly to individual students, and thankfully we know, we've surmised what who these students are and why he said what he did. So and that really enriches the experience for me. It's totally unexpected and very interesting.
That's a fantastic point, because I was even saying to him on what this really does has exposed is that I need to be stronger in actually understanding the context of the times and who he's speaking to in order to really understand the passages themselves. And that's and the dialogue that he's having, once you understand, who he's speaking to, like whether it's one of his students that they mentioned, I believe last week, was that he's not stupid, that he just wasn't speaking. Having that context, I believe that was his favorite student as well. So having that context is really important in order for us to really understand the passages that they're, that are written, and each one of the chapters. So I think that's a great point, Brian. I mean, that is surprising to me as well. It is like a dialogue, and it's a very pleasant surprise, to be quite honest.
The other thing that strikes me, and again, not a summary, but how modern this all seems to me, with the exception of ritual, which we've now talked about. It seems so modern. I'm astounded at that.
It does. I mean, it still has a lot of applicability to today. So you can see it clearly.
I'm retired in Las Vegas, and for recreation, I go to poker fests, which are called tournaments, poker tournaments, and it's like a ritual. You have to be at a table. You don't have to be there at the table when the tournament starts, but you might be. And at the beginning of the tournament, there's a tournament guy that has to read you the rules that they consider the most important, and don't do this, don't do that, stuff like that. And so there are rituals in our society. It's not that they don't exist. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, no. Will, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'm getting the he seems to really think that virtue is like I mean, he's not saying practice it so that you'll go to heaven or something like that. He's saying that it's really the way to be an effective person and to govern effectively. And then he also gives I think, somewhat unique in terms of ways of describing virtue is I think he grounds it in filial piety, ritual, and maybe honesty. The honesty is probably common to every conception of virtue, but I'm also just really excited going forward because now I have sort of the landscape of his thought a little bit, through book one. It was just sort of getting to know Confucius, and now I kind of I've got a sense of his basic ideas. So when the new chapters in book 3 come, I'll I think be easier to put them in context with other things I've heard. So it's just looking forward to going forward. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, yes, I'm excited as well. You know, this has been a lot of fun, and I appreciated everybody's contributions on this. Yeah, I think that this actually has given me the groundwork to kind of have a better understanding of what to expect going forward. You know, I'm going through the book a little bit, but you know, going through it with everyone here, it's much more enlightening for me personally. But thank you, Will. Does anybody else wish to comment?
That's the last exclamation mark.
Oh, is that the is that the last exclamation mark? Yeah, Will, you're the last. Okay. So what I will do really quickly is I'll just announce upcoming events. We have What Does Our Brain Know About Time? And that is tomorrow, which should be interesting. That is being hosted by Sanjay. It's part of Comprehensivist Wednesdays. The Bhagavad Gita will be covering chapter 14, the 3 gunas, on Thursday and Friday as well. We'll probably make it to chapter 15 by Friday. I think that that's what Shrikant's hope is. And Saturday, we have Asian philosophies, the Taoists' Utopia. So I don't know, I haven't read the write-up for that yet, but the Peach Blossom Spring, which was written during a time of political instability and national disunity. So during the Jin dynasty, 266 to 420. So that is also posted on the 52 Living Ideas website, and that's being hosted by, I believe Jason will be hosting that on Saturday. So those are our upcoming events. And I just want to say thank you everyone again for joining us here this evening. It's always an honor to be here with everyone. And I really did enjoy everybody's comments here this evening. And I look forward to seeing everybody next week.
Yep. Thanks, Confucius.
Thank you. Thank you, Confucius. Right.
Exactly.
Take care.